Hello, and welcome to Stop Let's Team Up, episode 108, Marvel Triple Action. If you are a fan of a certain age, say old as shit like me, about to turn 60, you would have remembered a time when you were reading the comic books in the 70s where you couldn't go to a shop and buy a collection of a run. They didn't have omnibuses, they didn't even have trades. If you wanted to read an old comic or find one, you had to search. I mean, comic shops are around at some point in this. I'm only going to talk about my personal memory about a very specific comic, Marvel Triple Action. But you would have to hunt down back issues. But what Marvel did, and it did several, and I'm going to give you a list and talk a little bit about some of them, but mostly about Marvel Triple Action. Marvel Triple Action ran for 47 issues from 1972 to 1979. First couple issues were reprints of Fantastic Four, 3 specific issues. I think they were starting to look at a run from like 55 up, but they jumped around. But then they went to the Avengers, started with issue 10, and went all the way to Avengers issue 54, which was the story where the new Black Knight, Dane Whitman, I think it's his first appearance. He poses as his predecessor and joins the Masters of Evil and saves the Avengers. That's a great story. It's some beautiful art there. You see him by that point. But I want to talk to you kind of about the reprints, specifically this one as a whole. This was a way you could, so later on, this is 72, so the FF issues that they were reprinting were at least 5 or 6 years old. The Avengers were 65, were about 7 years old. So it was a way, to show them. And that's how I got to learn about older Avengers. Because like I've said, the first Avenger I read was 105, which is, the very first Englehart issue. So, I mean, there were some reprints in giant sizes in the quarter. The giant size stuff had back issue reprints. There were some treasuries and stuff like that, but nothing like this. But this is a book my brother would buy because we didn't have these issues, and it was a huge change because, 105 may have been the first one I read, but had read like the Kree Skrull. My brother had most of those. We didn't have everything. I'm the one that kind of filled out our run later. But everything from basically 110, we had whatever it was at that point in 72 and growing. We had a run. But this was a way of filling them in. And I don't think we had them all. I think I kind of completed a run. I found like cheap copies in the comic shops I worked in and stuff to fill in the gap. So the intermix with, eventually I had a pretty good run of Avengers. I was missing about 25 issues between issue 40 and to 1. Most of the early ones. I had a couple. I had a bad copy of 8 with a torn cover, stuff like that. But I didn't have a lot. This is how I filled the gaps in the issues between the issue 35, which is, not that 35 is the first Roy Thomas story. This starts with 10, but this is how I filled the gaps from 10 until 54. And it was a good 3/4 of that run until I was working in a comic shop in high school, the comic book store. I've talked about it. And I filled in a bunch of that, including a 47, the first appearance of the Vision, which I had and read it once the day I bought it, and then only read it in a reprint, and I had that nice copy for 35 years. It was pride and joy in my collection for a long time. But this was the way I could learn about these older stories. And so, I knew that Hawkeye had been around. I had we had the guides, and I think those were out in the late 70s. They were in, like 1980. So I knew, and the Marvel Triple Action are documented in the Avenger one. But so I knew kind of who joined when. I knew that, yes, Swordsman was a member. He was a member, but I read it when I read the reprint issue 20. and I read that later, and you all have heard me talk. I really think Swordsman is a really underrated Avenger. He's a very finite lifespan, and he really, really is a great character in the Englehart era. But I didn't know that. I didn't. But I don't know when this was. I can't remember. But this book was so important because I got to the one where it reprints issue 45, Agony in the Anthill. It is a good starting on point of for a reread of the Avengers, and I had at some point with these, and it was issue 38 of Marvel Triple Action. The cover says The Avengers, starring Captain America, Hawkeye, Goliath, and Wasp. That was the Triple Action. That was the basically was one of this lineup was a 6-member lineup. It was Hawkeye, Quicksilver, Captain America, Wasp, and Goliath. But I had enough in reprints at some point in high school that I could do a read through of issue 45 until I would say into the Michelini stuff. And I did it. And it was one of the first times I had ever had done a read through, done a huge 100 and some issues read through. I'd done like a 50 when I first got my first run of Marvel 2-in-1. I would eventually, when the archives came out with Legion, I did sectional, like, I did all the Silver Age. And I think one time I went, because I had the little digest reprints for a while that had the first like 25, 30. I did as close as I could read through of Legion, and I read like 20 years worth, 30 years worth. But this was the first one, and it created part of my collection bug. I was an Avenger fan. It just made me become even a bigger Avenger fan because I knew the history. I could read it. And Roy takes over in issue 35, and I like some of his stuff. And I'm in a reread now, and I've been posting on it. And I said I was getting close to a special issue, and it is this one, The Agony of the Anthill. Because one, it's beautiful John Buscema art. I think this is where my brother had always told me Conan, Thor, and all the other things John Buscema had done. But this is where I fell in love with John Buscema, his Avengers run. Both of them. I think both of his runs are two of the best drawn eras in the history of the series. And I would, if I had a top 5, it would be Buscema, Perez. I don't know. I'll stop there. I will think about that. But I'm a huge. It gave me the ability to learn more about him and these stories and the ones before him, because I did get the ones before him, and I do like from 16 on when Hawkeye and the Cookie Quartet started, and there's some issues where it's just the bad guy of the week. But the Cold War kind of Chinese as the communist villain in the Avengers book, they really leaned into Vietnam because we were fighting a war in Vietnam. So they were looking at Southeast Asia. So they were the communist bad guys. And now they have a made-up country, Hinsen, which I kind of like them doing. Because all this continuity you lose, you get it back. But it just makes the villain a little bit smaller. That's not a big deal. But that had all that Cold War stuff, and I really liked it. And I wasn't a fan of Don Heck's later work. And I really didn't. It took me a while to learn to appreciate him. And I've heard just in a recent or two, Dave say something about Don Heck, so I'm going to ask him about it next time he's on the show. But I do like Don Heck's art in this era because it's really good. And this whole thing that Roy was doing, he brought Hercules in very quickly as a guest to try him out. He'd used him in Thor, or had been used in Thor by Stan and Jack. But he brought him in to add a member, but he took slow. And he did this thing that I've been talking about it a lot, about the coffee break moments, or the behind the scenes, the things in the office, the shared thing, the family, the interconnection of the characters outside of the action, which is what I think makes a great team book. I'm paraphrasing Kurt Busiek mentioned it in a recent post, and I agreed with him wholeheartedly. That's why I'm reading it. I want the drama, and it's why sometimes I don't really like the big guns who have their own books in team books, because it dilutes what you can do with them. But Royce started, and I really think it's his model we're seeing more than Stan's. Marv adopts it, and Marv Wolfman does, and especially in his Teen Titans. Chris Claremont does it in his X-Men. I think Kurt Busiek does it a great deal. There's a similarity to the writing. Fabian Nietzsche's. Oh my God, he does it. They're not copying each other, but they take time to build drama and interconnectivity of the characters, and I really like how they do it. And they're still doing it today, but I don't think it's done as much. But I love it in this, and these are really good ones. And these issues from 45 to, I guess, 63, where the art changes. Gene Colan comes in, and Hawkeye becomes Goliath, and then Sal Buscema takes over the art, and the team is Vision, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Goliath, Black Panther. And it's not a team I knew until I finally got that run together. And reading that is a whole different story for me as a reader, because it was so different than this, and I wasn't sure about it. But it has its own energy, and then you get to Adams, and then you get to the end of Roy's run, and then into Angela, and how the books change. But I really do love this era, these issues from like Agony of the Anthill all the way until right before, actually no, probably a little bit before Hank and Janet's wedding. It really starts to change at 47 and the 48, the Vision story. But this is it's like the tail end of that communist. They battle the first Red Guardian. Oh my God, it's great. Hercules is there. Quicksilver isn't less of a prick. I think it's some of the best. It's an underrated era of Avengers, and I think it's an important era, and I like it. But what I loved about it, and what I wanted to talk about, and I've been talking for a while now, just about Avengers, is that the ability to have these reprint books. It was special. They were neat. They were edited. My brother was fussing. He saw I posted, and he said they cut the damn things. And then he also mentioned in the House of Doom trade back, when they reprinted the Doom issues in there, they were the edited versions. And I'd have to sit. I don't even have any of these anymore. I wish I still had some of them, so I could compare them with the issues in the omnibuses to see what they cut out. But they did have to trim them for page counts were different. But these were a great way. You could go in and get it off the comic rack, and it was a story from 6 or 7 years ago when there were no reprints, and it was a great thing. And I'm glad. My brother bought a lot of them, and I found this great list. A lot of the information I'm getting is from the Comic Vine website. They have a great little section on it, and there's not, like Wiki doesn't have what it was about. They have a nice little thing. It was a big tool, and I appreciate the hard work they did to put that together. But here's a list of the Marvel Silver and Bronze Age reprints, and I will probably share this on the feeds. But there were giant-size books. The giant-size books, some of them were reprints. Fear up through 9 was a reprint. Crazy, the 73. Some of them up through, it was just Marvel Superheroes from 21 up. Yep. Marvel Tales was a good one. And Marvel's Greatest Comic, was the FF reprint. But Marvel Triple Action was the one I had, and I loved it. And these were great. It's kind of different now. I mean, a buddy gave me a new tablet, and I'm using the apps even more and reading more. I read a bunch of comics it's so much better than doing it on my phone or on my laptop. And we're spoiled. We're really spoiled with the internet and the apps and all the collections, the omnibuses, the library size, all these great reprints that in the old days we had these weird books we bought. Hey, what's this? Oh, it's an old story. We didn't know what it was. It was just great. They were great. It was a great way to discover the past, and you felt like you were in on a secret if your friends had never seen it. I remember showing them to buddies of mine who were you weren't really Avenger readers. They were X-Men or Titans or Someone when we were little with Justice League. We'd probably be Avengers and Justice League in my house and my friends. But they would go, "What's this?" And it was neat to show them, and I loved it. And I thought about it this week recently. I don't even know what sparked it. Oh, I was reading the Avengers, and I read a bunch in a row because I was remembering these books and how fun it was, the discovery and the joy of going back and filling holes in your collection. I don't collect singles anymore, so I've lost that itch. But back then, this kind of helped that itch, and it was just great. These were great, and these are a great-ish run of Avengers. So, folks, that's all I really wanted to talk about. I know I kind of meandered a little bit, but it just struck me, and I hope that you found it interesting. And I'm trying to stay on somewhat of a schedule with my new job and life, and taking some time off. At the end of October, I'm going to take a week off for my birthday. I probably will record because my wife will be working on some of those days. So, but I just wanted to keep up. So this is going to drop late on Sunday, very rushed. I hope you enjoyed it. And one day this week, the new Opal City Confidential will be another Opal City Media Club where I will talk about the 1926 silent film The Black Pirate, starring Douglas Fairbanks Sr. And as always, folks, be safe, be smart. Please be kind to one another. We're going into an election, and just be kind to one another. And read some comics. Read some reprints. Reprints are fun.